Milan Ross in a story about weight loss earlier this year, months before the death of his family.
Team 12's Bianca Bono is live in our alert center with the backstory of this now suspected killer. Bianca?
Well, guys, our 12 News crew sitting down with Anthony Milan Ross in early November to talk about his weight loss journey. Our photographer who did that interview telling me he now feels sick to his stomach.
Life is looking good for Milan Ross these days.
It's hard to believe that this man, who sat down with 12 News a couple months ago to talk about his apparent healthy lifestyle, is the same man who police say is responsible for the heinous triple murder on Highland Avenue. Milan Ross seemed to have completely transformed his life for the better. 3.5 years ago, he weighed more than 500 pounds. He claims he decided to make a change for his son, Nigel.
He started crying. In that moment, I learned that the decisions I was making didn't just affect me.
Ross losing more than half his body weight. 3 months ago, posting this video to social media of him and his son celebrating his weight loss at a theme park.
How was that?
That was amazing!
Let me warn you right now, and before we dive into this true crime mystery, this is one of the most disturbing Christmas Day cases I've ever come across. Not because it's bloody or graphic, but because of how fast everything goes from perfectly normal to something you'd never imagine happening behind a camera-ready smile. And yes, the footage you're going to hear about, the Christmas Eve video, the one with the innocent singing, it was recorded just hours before one of the darkest holiday tragedies I have ever researched. So if you're new here, welcome to Famous Crime Cases. We bring you rare, disturbing, and often overlooked true crime stories, the ones most people wish they'd never watched, but can't stop thinking about afterward. If that sounds like your thing, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and please make sure notifications are actually on. Alright, deep breath. Let's get into it. Before his face turned up on every news station, before his name was tied to the worst possible headlines, Anthony Milan Ross built an entire persona online. The inspirational comeback king. And like a lot of people who rise too fast, too publicly, nobody saw the cracks until they were far too wide to hide. He didn't start out as some polished influencer. He was a guy who said he was fighting for his life. According to him, he'd reached a breaking point after stepping onto a scale one morning. His weight had climbed past 500 pounds. He said he felt trapped, suffocating inside a body that didn't feel like his anymore. So he got drastic. He changed his diet. He started walking. Walking turned into jogging. Jogging into running. And the weight fell off so dramatically that people didn't just notice, they wanted in on the secret. He stopped calling himself Anthony and started using his middle name, Milan. A reborn version of himself. A new identity. A self-made miracle. Soon the cameras came out. The speeches started. The healthy cooking videos. The feel-good Instagram posts with bright colors and perfect plant-based meals. He got invited to wellness events. He launched books. People cried when they heard him speak. And then came the moment that made him feel like he'd arrived. He appeared in the documentary Eating You Alive, alongside Samuel L. Jackson and James Cameron. For someone who reinvented himself publicly, that level of exposure can become addictive. And Milan leaned into it hard. But behind the flawless smile and avocado recipes, something else was happening. Something he wasn't cooking his way out of. Something no Instagram filter could fix. The man his fans saw wasn't the man his family lived with. At the center of Milan's world was Iris, steady, responsible, grounded. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't chasing fame. She worked in healthcare and kept their home running like clockwork. Bills paid. Kids supported. Schedule organized. If Milan represented transformation, Iris represented stability. They had 2 children together, Nigel, a bright, witty boy with a smile that melted everyone he met, and baby Anora, still learning the shape of the world around her. To outsiders, they looked like a family who had fought through adversity and come out stronger. But those closest to them saw it first. Milan wasn't handling the pressure well. His need to keep up his perfect public persona started to bleed into their home life. The smiling chef you'd see on morning TV was not the man who came home late, restless, Pacing, unable to sleep, Iris noticed the changes. The mood swings, the strange comments, the flashes of anger, then the apologies, then the excuses, then the strange, paranoid claims. Stuff about curses, hexes, messages from unseen forces. By June 2017, she'd reached her limit. She filed for divorce. And that's when the mask finally started cracking wide open. After the divorce papers were served, the inspirational figure fans adored began to morph into someone frantic, unpredictable, and deeply unstable. Family members saw it. Friends saw it. Even casual acquaintances saw it. He sent Iris messages that were all over the place, calling her a horrible name one moment, professing his love the next. His behavior swung like a pendulum. Devotion one day, threats the next. Then came the rumors that he wasn't sleeping, sometimes for days, that he spoke rapidly, jumping from idea to idea, that he'd show up unannounced, demanding the children. One day, according to Iris's roommate, he even arrived with a hidden firearm. But here's the disturbing part. While he was falling apart privately, he was still building the illusion publicly. He adopted a dog. He got engaged to a new girlfriend. He wrote himself a business check on Christmas Eve. To the outside world, he looked like a man planning for tomorrow. But late at night, behind closed doors, he was searching for things no motivational speaker should ever need to know. Gun silencers, acid, skin-melting chemicals, details about an entirely different man who murdered his family on Christmas Day. And then he told at least one person to expect something big on Christmas. Everyone hoped these were just dark thoughts brought on by stress. But they weren't just thoughts anymore. They were a blueprint. Christmas Eve should have been peaceful, full of warm lights, last-minute wrapping, laughter. But inside Milan's apartment, things were spiraling fast. He hadn't slept in days. He was drinking heavily. He was sending frenzied messages to Iris that made no sense. And then, in the middle of all this chaos, he turned on the camera. Because of course he did. The persona had to perform. He filmed himself with Nigel, smiling, laughing, singing Christmas carols. Hey guys, hanging out with Nigel on Christmas Eve, we're about to embarrass ourselves. You ready, buddy?
You better watch out.
You better not cry.
You better not pout.
I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. Dope, dope, dope.
He's making a list and checking it twice. He's gonna find out who's naughty or nice. Santa Claus is coming to town.
And then they sing, You better watch out. If you didn't know the context, you'd think it was adorable, harmless. But everything behind the scenes, the searches, the threats, the insomnia, the unraveling had already happened when that video was filmed. That wasn't a happy father. That was a mask. And it was slipping. By Christmas afternoon, Iris gathered her courage and drove to Milan's apartment to pick up the kids. Despite everything, she still believed in co-parenting. She believed he loved Nigel and Anora. She believed whatever was happening to him didn't include them. She was wrong. Around that time, residents of the complex saw a woman sprinting across the courtyard, terrified, desperate, trying to escape something horrific. That woman was Iris. Witnesses said she looked like someone running from a sudden nightmare she had no time to explain. Behind her was Milan, not the smiling chef, not the wellness speaker, not the father from the Christmas Eve video. A version of him that none of them had ever seen before. Iris made it to a small patio area, turned around, and tried to plead with him. Before anyone could intervene, Milan raised the gun and fired. A neighbor shouted, "Is she okay?" Milan turned, calm as stone, and said, "No." Then he pointed the weapon at the witness, forcing them back. After that, he returned to his apartment, where his 2 children were still inside. Moments later, neighbors heard more gunshots. Panic rippled across the complex. People ran, hid, grabbed their phones with trembling hands. Then at 2:52 p.m., Iris's sister received a text. Just 2 sentences. "I killed Iris and the kids with a gun." By the time police arrived around 3:45 p.m., they found Iris outside, unresponsive. But the kids, they were nowhere to be seen. Officers surrounded the apartment. They called out to Milan. He answered, but everything he said contradicted the last thing. "They're safe. I'll hurt them if you don't leave. They're already gone." Negotiators kept him talking, hoping to buy even a single moment that might save the children. Hours passed. The sun went down. Gunfire echoed from inside the apartment throughout the night. At around 7:30 p.m., Milan fired at officers, injuring one with shrapnel. SWAT rolled in robots to avoid casualties. The first robot crept down the hall, and the camera revealed the small, motionless body of baby Anora. Minutes later, they found Nigel. There was no chance either child had survived. Just after 10 p.m., after 7 hours of chaos, Milan fired again, this time prompting officers to breach. He eventually surrendered, completely unharmed. In a single day, the man whose entire brand was reinvention destroyed the 3 people who had once believed in him the most. The next day, Phoenix residents tried to make sense of what happened. Reporters replayed the Christmas Eve video on every station. The cheerful singing, the smiling child, now twisted into something haunting and unbearable. One local reporter summed up the city's mood. "It's horrifying on any day, but on Christmas? People here are struggling to process what happened just a few doors away." But as journalists dug deeper, more truths surfaced, things few people knew. A woman who claimed to be Milan's ex-wife spoke out, saying he had abandoned her and their 4 daughters nearly 2 decades earlier. He kept this previous family a secret from Iris. His daughters, now adults, revealed years of abuse, neglect, and cruelty they said they endured under his roof. They talked about food being withheld for punishment, about manipulative control, about living in fear. One daughter said, "He inspired strangers with healthy food, but he used food as a weapon against us." These weren't random accusations. They were consistent, detailed, and heartbreaking. And Iris, before she died, had recently learned about this hidden past and was pushing for full custody of her children. The picture that emerged was not of a man who suddenly snapped. It was a man who had been wearing a mask for years. The trial began months later, and by the time Milan stepped into the courtroom, the country already knew his face. The once celebrated wellness coach walked in hunched, quiet, expressionless, almost like he wasn't fully inside his own body. He didn't look like the smiling plant-based advocate from television. He didn't look like the energetic speaker from self-help seminars. He looked vacant, and the courtroom knew why. They had already seen everything. The evidence, the Christmas Eve video, the text message confession, the body cam footage, the surveillance audio, the Google searches, and the worst part, the autopsy findings for 10-month-old Anora and 11-year-old Nigel. When those details were read aloud, multiple people in the courtroom had to walk out. Even veteran officers, people who had seen the worst of humanity, lowered their heads. The prosecution didn't waste a second. Their case was simple. This was premeditated murder, not a snap, not a moment of madness, not temporary insanity, but a series of methodical decisions made long before Christmas Day. They laid out a timeline so clear, so sharp, that people in the gallery were shaking their heads in disbelief. They showed the jury Milan's search history on silencers, his research on acid and decomposition, his obsession with another man who murdered his family on Christmas years earlier, his messages to friends hinting that big change is coming, pray for me, his repeated threats toward Iris, documented by her and others, his increasing paranoia, delusions, and violent ideation. Then they brought in neighbors, the ones who saw Iris run for her life, saw Milan pull the trigger. Then came the digital forensics team. They played a clip, the officers outside Milan's door, trying to negotiate. You could hear him screaming irrational statements, sometimes claiming the kids were alive, sometimes saying they were dead, all while firing shots sporadically. Then they played the police robot footage, the slow crawl into the dark hallway where the small bodies of the children were found. The jury didn't move. Some held tissues. One woman was trembling. The defense had just one strategy. Milan was mentally ill. Too ill to form intent. Too ill to know what he was doing. Too ill to understand it was wrong. They brought in psychiatrists who described what they believed was a severe, untreated manic or psychotic episode. They suggested sleep deprivation had pushed him past the edge of reality. They highlighted his erratic behavior, delusions, and irrational contradictions during the standoff. They said the man on Christmas Day wasn't the same man he had been months or years earlier. But there was a problem. A big one. Mental illness explains behavior. It does not excuse murder. And it does not prove legal insanity. Especially not when the evidence shows planning, preparation, and deliberate action. The prosecutor, a woman known for her cold, sharp courtroom presence, stood up and approached the psychiatric expert. Her voice never rose. She didn't pace. She didn't show anger. She just asked one question. Did he know how to load the gun? Yes. Did he know where he was pointing it? Yes. Did he tell someone he killed them? Yes. Did he try to stop officers from entering because he knew what they would find? Yes. Then she leaned in slightly. Does a person who knows what they did and tries to hide it meet the legal definition of insanity? The psychiatrist hesitated. No. And that was it. The line that sealed Milan's fate. But the most devastating testimony came from someone who had never spoken publicly before. One of Milan's daughters from his first hidden family. She walked in with her hands clasped tightly, nervous but determined. She took a long breath before speaking. She talked about living with a man who controlled everything. About punishments that made no sense. About food used as leverage. About the fear that hung over their childhood like a shadow. But then she said something that made the entire courtroom go silent. When I heard what happened, I wasn't shocked. I was horrified, but not shocked. We lived for years knowing he was capable of this. There were quiet sobs in the gallery. Even the judge paused before speaking again. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a tragedy decades in the making. When the prosecution delivered their closing argument, the room was locked on every word. She didn't raise her voice once. This was not a moment of madness. This was a series of choices. Choices made by a man who wanted control more than he wanted a family. He filmed himself smiling with Nigel on Christmas Eve, after researching how to kill without being heard. He told friends to expect something big, while knowing exactly what that meant. He texted a confession, because he knew what he had done. Then she held up a tiny Christmas stocking, one belonging to baby Anora. Justice is not enough for these children, but justice is all we can give. When she set the stocking down, half the courtroom was crying. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. That's how overwhelming the evidence was. That's how obvious the truth became. They returned and delivered their decision in a trembling but unanimous voice. Guilty. On every count. First-degree murder for Iris. First-degree murder for Nigel. First-degree murder for baby Anora. Aggravated assault on a police officer. Multiple weapons charges. Endangerment charges. Everything. Milan didn't cry. He didn't look confused. He didn't look angry. He just stared forward, hollow, emotionless, as if the weight of what he had done couldn't reach the place he had disappeared into. The judge, a woman known for her quiet dignity, spoke directly to him. Her voice was soft, but there was no mercy in it. What you took from this world cannot be measured. Not in suffering. Not in time. Not in years. These children will never grow up. Their mother will never return. And the fear, pain, and devastation you caused on Christmas Day will echo in this community forever. Then she delivered the sentence. For the murders of Iris, Nigel, and Anora, you are hereby sentenced to natural life in prison. 3 times. Consecutively. He will never walk free again. As guards moved to escort him out, something unexpected happened. His daughters, the ones who had testified against him, never looked in his direction. Not once. They sat together, holding hands, letting the moment pass without giving him a single second of their attention. That silence was louder than any scream. And it said everything. Now, as your narrator, here's the part one need to say, because this case still haunts me. and it should haunt all of us. This tragedy didn't come out of nowhere. There were warning signs. So many red flags. So many cries for help. So many moments where intervention might have changed the outcome. And this is the part we often don't want to hear. Mental illness doesn't make someone dangerous, but ignoring it can. Avoiding treatment can. Silence can. Pretending someone is fine because they smile on camera can. And sometimes, even with warnings, the people closest to the danger are the ones least protected by the system built to help them. This case is proof that not every horror story happens in the dark. Some happen in broad daylight, on live video, in holiday outfits, behind a man holding a camera, smiling with his kids. That's why, when we see something off, when someone is spiraling, when someone shows signs of delusion, aggression, or instability, we cannot look away. We cannot assume it will calm down. We cannot assume everything is fine because it looks fine online. People's lives depend on seeing the truth early, before the mask becomes the monster. And if you made it this far, thank you. Cases like this are emotionally heavy, but they matter. They remind us to look beyond the surface, to check on people, and to take red flags seriously. If you found the story meaningful, consider subscribing to Famous Crime Cases, turn on notifications, comment below with your thoughts on this case, and share this video. It helps the channel grow, and it helps these victims be remembered. Stay safe.